All right, get ready to dive into one of the most debated paranormal cases ever.
Ooh, sounds spooky.
It's the Enfield Poltergeist.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that one.
Yeah, and we're going to unpack a Wikipedia article about this infamous haunting.
Okay.
It's in Spanish.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, so this all happened back in 1977 in a seemingly normal house,
Right.
in Enfield, England. A single mother and her 4 kids,
Okay.
just living their lives. And suddenly they find themselves dealing with some seriously spooky stuff.
So, like, what kind of spooky stuff are we talking about here? What makes this case so fascinating?
Well, I mean, that's the big question, right? Was it a genuine haunting or was there something else going on?
Right, yeah.
So we're going to have to look at both sides of the story, the evidence that supports the paranormal claims,
Right.
and then the arguments from the skeptics because,
Okay.
maybe there's a more down-to-earth explanation.
Yeah, you gotta weigh all the evidence. Like, was it
Okay.
a ghost? Was it something else?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So first, let's set the scene, right?
Okay.
Imagine the Hodgson family, Peggy, the mom, and her 4 children, Margaret, Panet, Johnny, and Billy.
Mm-hmm.
They're just, living in this house, and then boom, things start to get weird in August of 76.
And like, how did it start? Like, did a ghost just appear out of nowhere, or was it more subtle?
No. It was subtle at first.
Okay.
Chairs moving on their own, strange noises.
Creepy.
Yeah, the kind of stuff that makes you second guess yourself.
Right.
Wait a minute, did I really just see that?
Yeah.
But Peggy, being a sensible mom, she's not going to ignore it.
Yeah, especially when it starts to get worse.
Right, especially when things start escalating.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. So she calls the police, and get this, one of the officers
Okay.
that responded actually saw a chair move inexplicably right before his eyes.
Whoa. Hold on. So even the police officer saw something weird?
Yeah.
That's kind of wild.
Yeah, that's pretty significant.
Yeah, because even a cop is freaked out. You
Yeah.
know, something strange is going on.
Exactly. If the police are scratching their heads,
Yeah.
something strange is happening.
Right.
And it just spirals from there. Loud noises, objects being thrown around, furniture overturning.
Like out of control.
Oh, yeah. It's like something straight out of a horror movie.
Wow.
There were even reports of levitation.
What? Seriously?
Yeah, I mean, this is getting a lot of attention.
So, like, people are talking about it. It's making the news.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, word spreads.
Okay.
Like wildfire. And suddenly, the national newspapers, the big guys, like the Daily Mail, the Daily Mirror,
Oh, wow. Okay.
they're all over this, turning the Hodgson house into a media circus.
And that's got to add a whole other layer to things, right? Like, suddenly you've got all these reporters and cameras around. Does that affect things?
Yeah, I mean, you have to think about the impact of all that attention, right?
Right.
I mean, did it influence the events? Did it put pressure on the family? It's like a chicken and egg situation.
Yeah, it's hard to say what's cause and effect at that point.
Right, exactly.
So what happens next? Do any, like, paranormal investigators show up?
That's exactly what happens. Enter
Okay.
Arish Gross
Okay.
and Guy Lyon Playfair.
All right.
These guys are from the Society for Psychical Research,
Okay.
which is a pretty prestigious organization dedicated to investigating all sorts of paranormal claims
Okay.
using scientific methods.
So they're not just,
They're not, no.
some ghost hunters with a camera?
No, these are serious researchers.
Okay, all right.
And their findings, well, let's just say they added fuel to the fire.
Oh, really? What did they find?
Well, they reported hearing, like, curious whistling and barking noises,
Huh.
which they believed might point to some sort of unseen entity.
Interesting. So are they leaning towards like a full-on paranormal explanation then?
It wasn't quite that simple. You got to remember Playfair, who actually ended up writing a book about the Enfield haunting.
Okay.
He was often skeptical of the children's accounts.
Really? Even though he's a paranormal investigator?
Yeah, he wondered if maybe some of the phenomena, could be explained by kids being kids.
Okay, like exaggerating or playing pranks.
Yeah, maybe exaggerating or playing pranks.
So even the experts aren't totally convinced.
Exactly.
That's interesting.
It highlights the challenge, right, of investigating these types of claims.
Mm-hmm.
How do you separate the genuine paranormal activity from trickery?
Right, especially when kids are involved.
Especially when kids are involved, yeah. It's a real head scratcher.
It really is. It's like trying to solve a puzzle, but some of the pieces are missing.
Exactly. And just when you think you might be getting close to the truth, you stumble upon another piece of evidence and throws everything into question.
Okay, well, let's talk about that evidence then.
Okay.
What were some of the key pieces that seemed to support the idea that something truly paranormal was happening?
Well, I mean, there has to be a reason this case still fascinates us, right?
Right.
So let's dig into it.
One piece of evidence that really jumps out is this video recording
Oh, yeah.
that seems to show Janet Hodson bending spoons
Uh-huh.
and even trying to bend an iron bar.
Yeah, I've seen that footage. It's pretty wild.
It is. It's hard to explain
Wow.
how a young girl could bend metal like that.
Yeah.
And then there's Russ's account.
Okay.
He said he actually saw Janet hitting the ceiling with a broom,
Wow.
even though she wasn't tall enough to do it normally.
Mm-hmm.
And he also said that she hid his tape recorder,
Really?
even though he just had it a minute ago.
So, I mean, these are firsthand observations from
Yeah.
a respected researcher.
Right.
Makes them kind of hard to just dismiss, right?
Yeah, but remember, even Cross and Playfair
Yeah.
had their doubts about some things.
Right. They weren't the only ones.
No, not at all.
There were plenty of skeptics
Oh, yeah.
who weren't buying into the Enfield haunting.
Right, and those skeptics had some good points. They weren't just,
Right.
brushing it off. They were thinking critically,
Uh-huh.
looking for other explanations.
Okay.
Like, for example, there was this famous ventriloquist named Ray Allen,
Okay.
and he thought that the male voices that seemed to be coming from Janet
Right.
were actually just vocal tricks.
Huh. So maybe not a demonic entity.
Maybe not. And here's something interesting.
Okay.
That Playfair noticed himself,
Uh-huh.
one of Janet's voices,
Mhm.
which she called Bill,
Okay.
had this habit of changing topics suddenly.
Right.
And guess what? Janet herself did the same thing when she was speaking normally.
Interesting.
Makes you wonder.
It does. So are we saying like Janet was faking it?
Well, some researchers definitely thought so.
Okay.
Like psychologists Anita Gregory and John Beloff.
Okay.
They observed Janet and thought she was intentionally faking some incidents, especially when reporters were around.
Well, yeah. I mean,
I know
teenagers.
there's a little bit of mischief.
Exactly.
Attention.
Yeah.
It all kind of makes sense.
Right.
And then you've got groups like the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry,
Oh.
or CSI,
Okay.
which has stage magicians and other experts who know how illusions work.
Right.
They were really critical of Cross and Playfair,
Okay.
saying they were too quick to jump to the paranormal.
So they're saying they were being a bit too trusting.
You could say that
Okay.
the CSI thought the paranormal investigators
Yeah.
let their beliefs cloud their judgment,
Right.
and they didn't really scrutinize the evidence like they should have.
So it's tricky. You've got evidence that seems to support the paranormal.
Right.
And then you have these arguments that
Yeah.
say maybe it's a hoax.
It's enough to make your head spin.
It really is.
And just when you think you've got a handle on things.
Yeah.
Remember how Janet and Margaret admitted to some trickery?
Yeah, they confessed to faking some stuff.
Yeah, but
Then
then
they
took it back, right? They did, and the story behind that is really something
Okay.
Cross and Playfair.
Yeah.
They were convinced the haunting was real,
Right.
and they pressured the girls to retract their confession.
Wow. Imagine the pressure.
Yeah, right?
Confess and then be forced to take it back.
It must have been so confusing for them.
Yeah.
And this whole thing really hurt Cross and Playfair's reputation.
Yeah. I could see how.
The skeptics saw it as proof
Uh-huh.
that the girls were manipulating the investigators.
Yeah.
And that the investigators were too invested in the paranormal.
So where does that leave us?
Well, we've got evidence for both sides.
Yeah.
Confession or retraction, and these two paranormal investigators
Oh,
whose reputations are on the line.
it's a real mess.
It is, but even with all the controversy, the Enfield Poltergeist is still captivating.
Oh, absolutely.
It's had such a big impact on pop culture.
Yeah, for sure.
It's inspired so many books, documentaries, movies.
Oh, yeah.
The Enfield case is like Hollywood gold.
Yeah, it's like catnip for them. Where do you even start?
I know, right? You've got Ghost Watch.
Oh, yeah, Ghost Watch.
That BBC mockumentary
Yeah.
from back in '92 really blurred the lines between reality and fiction.
Yeah.
And then there's Interview with a Poltergeist,
Uh-huh.
that Channel 4 documentary from 2007,
Yeah.
which took a more serious look at the events.
Yeah.
And of course, The Conjuring too.
Oh, how can you forget The Conjuring, too?
I know, that one really brought the Enfield Poltergeist to a
Oh.
whole new audience.
Yeah. Scary stuff.
Yeah, it definitely took some liberties with the story,
Right.
but it captured that feeling of dread,
Mhm.
that sense that something evil might be lurking just out of sight.
Yeah. And that's the power of this case, right?
I think so.
It makes you question what you believe.
Exactly. It makes you wonder if some of it was faked.
Yeah.
How do we explain what the police officers saw?
Right. Or that footage of Janet bending metal.
Yeah, could there have been some real paranormal stuff mixed in with the trickery?
It's the million-dollar question.
It is, and we may never know for sure.
So what's the takeaway?
I think the Enfield case
Yeah.
is a reminder that sometimes the best mysteries are the ones that stay unsolved.
Huh.
It forces us to think about what we don't know,
Right.
to question what we think is true,
Uh-huh.
and to admit that we don't understand everything.
Yeah. It's humbling.
It really is. And it reminds us that even with all our science and technology,
Mm-hmm.
there are still things we can't explain.
So what about the Hodgson family?
Oh, yeah. What happened to them after all this?
Yeah, it's easy to get lost in the debate over what was real and what wasn't.
Yeah.
But for me, it always comes back to the human side of things, you know?
Right.
Like imagine being in their shoes.
Yeah.
A family suddenly thrown into this media frenzy.
Exactly. I mean, Peggy Hodgson,
Right.
a single mom raising 4 kids.
Yeah.
Suddenly she's dealing with not just, possible paranormal activity,
Right.
but also the whole world watching them.
It's a lot to handle.
It's got to be overwhelming.
What about the kids?
Yeah, they were just kids.
Yeah.
Caught in the middle of all this chaos.
Whether you believe in ghosts or not,
Right.
it's clear the Hodgson children were really affected by this.
Oh, absolutely. Their lives were changed forever.
Yeah.
Janet especially,
Yeah.
she talked about how much of a toll it took on her.
I can't even imagine.
I know. It's hard to fathom
Yeah.
having your home invaded by something you don't understand.
Yeah.
Something maybe even evil.
It's got to stay with you.
It does. And it's a reminder that even the most sensational stories
Yeah.
have real people at the center of them.
It's important to remember that.
It is. We often forget.
Yeah.
We get so caught up in the debate and the theories
Right.
that we lose sight of the people involved.
It's something to think about.
Definitely.
So as we wrap up our deep dive
Yeah.
into the Enfield Poltergeist case,
Mm-hmm.
I guess we have more questions than answers.
I think that's fair to say.
But maybe that's all right.
Yeah.
Maybe the point is that it makes us curious.
Mm-hmm.
It makes us question what we think we know.
Right, and it reminds us that there's still so much out there.
Yeah, that we don't understand.
Exactly, the Enfield Poltergeist.
Mhm.
Whether it was a real haunting, a hoax, or maybe a little bit of both.
Yeah.
It shows us the limits of what we know.
Yeah.
It reminds us that reality can be subjective,
Huh.
shaped by our perceptions, our biases.
Right, the stories we tell ourselves.
Exactly.
And sometimes the most captivating stories
Yeah.
are the ones that blur the lines between fact and fiction.
Mm-hmm.
The ones that leave us wondering
Yeah.
what really happened.
We may never know the whole truth about Enfield.
Yeah.
But the questions it raises about reality,
Mm-hmm.
belief, the human mind,
Yeah.
those are questions that really stick with us.
You do.
So until next time,
Yeah.
keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep an open mind.
The world is full of wonders,
It is.
both the real and imagined,
That's for sure.
just waiting to be discovered.
Absolutely. 12-7 people.